Okay, so thank you for joining me today. I'm Ravi Nahar, the founder of Remind Decoded, and today's presentation is on mental health and spirituality. This is a subject area which I'm not going to claim to be of any expert. I'm not an expert within mental health. Um, However, it's certainly something that I have been through, and I know there's a lot of people that I have spoken to throughout the last 4 years since I've launched Remind Decoded who have gone through their own mental health issues. And mental health comes in different forms. There is mental health like having low feelings and just not feeling right. And then there is kind of severe mental health to the point that someone can actually go and take their own life. And for that category of people, something like the spirituality side of things is probably, they've probably gone way beyond being able to grasp that concept, because what a lot of research has found is that those people had already made a very serious decision to go ahead and do what they've done. And it is usually a sequence of very small but significant events which leads up to that point. Now, my kind of internal feeling is that when a lot of people do go to the point of the severe end of mental health, of taking their own life, it's usually something that they will do in an act of extreme emotions and feelings, and they basically just cannot see beyond their reality. I don't believe that they actually wanted to do it. But anyway, before we go into the kind of nitty gritty of it, it's only a half an hour presentation. There is a lot to cover. There are a few things that I want you to try, a couple of things even. And before we do that, just the kind of the marketing side of Remind Decoded. So just want to go through, oops, go to this. We are available on Zoom. We do live Zoom webinars, YouTube. If you search for Remind Decoded on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, you'll find all our posts and videos. And Thinktree accredit our courses in the UK for professional accredited development points. We do offer a lot of things for free over social media, and the Kriya Yoga meditation lessons are available to you through a donation or Guru Dakshina, whatever you want to call it. However, there are some people who decide to go through Thinktree Hub because they want that membership and they want access to other healthcare, alternative medicine services. And there will also be a book that I am writing, which should be available digitally by the end of this year. So these are just some statistics which I've pulled out. And if anybody is interested in wanting to know more about these statistics, I can send you the paper. But mental health is obviously a very serious issue. And I'm just going to give you about 10-15 seconds just to read through those figures before I start talking about the text there. So there's a very famous saying which says that sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And what I'm going to show you is that actually names hurt a lot more than people hitting you physically. Because when you attack someone emotionally and psychologically and mentally, that ultimately breaks them. And anybody who goes through a very severe form of mental health, personally, I have been through it. I've been prescribed medication for it. However, I decided not to take that medication because I applied my own Kriya Yoga meditation techniques and wisdom that I had been taught over a period of 20 to 25 years. And I found that to be more impactful in terms of what you get out of it at the end of the day. Now, in the middle there, I've got not only failure and loss of purpose leads to low feelings. However, even being successful can also lead to low feelings. And again, I'm sure like many of us, I've been in that position as well, where you have achieved the success that you were looking to achieve, but you're still feeling very dissatisfied with life. And this usually comes as a result of loss of purpose. So if you have no purpose, whether you're failing or succeeding, you will never be really content and happy with your life and your environment. And this is something which the ancient rishis, the illumined rishis of ancient India, advocated. They spoke about this and they said that you can have health, wealth, wisdom, you can have everything that you want because we are made in the image of God and therefore we are entitled to all of God's gifts. But there is a secret, there is a hidden secret within our scriptures, within the scriptures of ancient India, that if you are able to unlock and decode them and apply them, more importantly, the application, then you are able to gain some sort of success from it. It's not to say that you're going to become a multi-billionaire or a trillionaire or whatever. Success is something which is very personable. And to me, the definition of success is the progressive realization of any worthy ideal. And that could mean absolutely anything. And when people don't understand that, this is when these types of figures come up. So the figures at the top there are the figures that are pulled out for India, and the figures at the bottom are the figures for the UK. And what's really surprising, or not so surprising, is that actually the vast majority of people who suffer from mental health are males. But when you look at the whole marketing strategy by a lot of these creative agencies that try to make the general public more aware of mental health, it is always a female. Now, it's not to kind of distinguish between males and females, it's just as important. But what's really interesting is that with males, when we're talking about emotions, what males actually do, because they are programmed to do it from the point that they become conscious, is to suppress their feelings, whereas females generally tend not to suppress their feelings. And these suppressed emotions, suppressed feelings, ultimately become engraved within your connective tissue. And what happens is that your body, which is like an energy field, because that's what it is. That's why we have chakras or centers of consciousness of auras. That's why we are now able to also measure them, is because your body is an energy field. And these feelings, these desires, these likes, these galoshes, which we generally are told to suppress within us, start impacting those chakras or those centers of consciousness, and everything comes out of balance, which leads progressively towards the burden of disease and ultimately death. And death comes to everybody, but to some it comes in the form of mental health issues. So this over here is just something that I picked out from a very high impact research journal. I think it was Lancet, and it's showing the prevalence of mental health disorder in India. Now, I don't know whether this is the case or if there's anybody here today who has friends or does live in any of these parts of India where there is actually a very high prevalence of mental health disorder. And what would be really interesting is to look at the kind of demographics of people that live there, their kind of ambitions, and what their environments are like. However, mental health problems is not just confined to India or the UK or the US, Europe. It's actually a global phenomena, and it's one which is not really discussed, or it's a bit of it can be a bit of a taboo um, subject area, particularly within certain cultures. I know personally from the Asian culture, it is a kind of a taboo subject area where people talk about mental health, and then they go off into another conversation that you're almost made to feel as if you're weak as a result of mental health issues. But what a lot of people don't understand and get is that these mental health issues begin as a result of conversations like that. Like I said, sticks and stones can break your bones, but names will never hurt you. Names, words that you choose, how you communicate with someone makes a massive difference in how they ultimately end up feeling. You can say the same thing in a different tone using the exact same language, but changing the words slightly, and the entire meaning of that sentence structure can mean totally different, and how it impacts that individual can mean something totally different as well. And there are some individuals who are very good at using words languages and sentence structures, and they will use them as weapons. Words are weapons because words are ultimately energy. If you think of words and sentence structures like mantras, they're more or less the same thing. It's just in a different language. It's just English or French or American English or whatever, or Hindi or Sanskrit. Ultimately, they are words. They are like mantras. And if you put enough concentration into those words and enough emotions and feelings into those words, and you throw those words towards someone, it will hurt them. Words will hurt people and they will ultimately destroy them. And there is a very famous case in India where that's happened now to a very famous personality. And ultimately, it's happened as a result of small, significant events which have happened over a period of time. Now, in the next slide, what I want you to do is spend about 30 seconds just focusing on the video. And it is a technique which I teach in the Remind Decoded lessons. It's a technique which I call switch. It's how you switch your frame of mind or your consciousness or your awareness from one particular aspect to another. So from going from maybe not being so focused to being focused, from being in one type of environment to being in a different type of environment, because our environment can change because of the people that we interact with around us. I do want to apologize that my connection is slightly unstable. So if anybody's having any problems and looking or watching any part of this, just drop me a message. So here's the video, which I'm going to play for you. Now, for those of us that are familiar with London tubes, you might know what station this is. But if you do exactly as it says on the screen there, you will notice that the train will move in the direction that you want it to. If you want something to come towards you and you put enough focus and energy into it with enough concentration, it will come towards you. And if you want it to go the other way, you can do that also. Now, this is a technique which I called switch the mind. And it's also a technique which actually in America, the Navy SEALs use this technique when they are working together as a small team for a high profile case or a high profile mission. And they use this technique which they call switching the mind from one state to another state, from an individual state of what their emotions and feelings are of the situation to working in synchronization as a team. These guys don't communicate with one another verbally when out on the battlefield. However, they are mentally connected because they're synchronized. And it's a technique which is very heavily explored in military. So the next slide is, again, something that I want you to think about in terms of how the mind works and what we mean by the spirituality aspect of mental health issues. If you were to picture your mind as a bottle with sand inside it, and you shake that bottle, that sand is going to be all over the place within that bottle. It's going to muddy the water. But if you allow that bottle to settle, eventually the sand will also settle. And your mind is like that. When you're all over the place because of emotion, because of what people have said to you, or because of traumatic experiences or overwhelming experiences throughout your life journey, what happens is that your mind goes all over the place. And naturally, your mind sits in different places within the body. It's something which we're not really taught about. There is a slide within here which I might touch upon it later, I think is in 3 or 4 slides from now, but it goes through understanding the difference between the brain, the consciousness, and the mind as 3 different entities which need to work in synchronization. And it all starts off from understanding yourself, being able to practice certain yogic techniques of Kriya Yoga to bring all those chemicals and hormones back into balance, because ultimately that is where it all begins from. Every thought produces a biochemical reaction in your brain, which matches a particular feeling within the body. Now, that's where science starts from. Science doesn't really go beyond that, which is what is causing that thought to happen, and how do you actually battle against that thought when it does happen. because it's usually an event with a person or a group of people which ultimately leads to that thought, or it could be past emotions. Like I said before, there are events that you will go through in your life which you suppress. In the corporate world, is both males and females. You're pretty much told to do, to kind of suck it up and get on with what needs to be done. And personally, in the personal world or your personal life, it's usually males who tend to suppress those emotions, whereas females tend not to suppress them because they're more expressive about their emotions. In certain cases, now it's very much also based culturally as well. And in the United Kingdom, for example, females are more expressive of emotions in my personal experience. However, in kind of Asian culture, Indian culture, in India, for example, again, based on my personal experiences, females are also, forced to suppress their emotions, which ultimately also comes out when they go into other parts of the world. Hence why it's a global phenomena. For example, this is the reason why generalized anxiety disorder is such a common problem amongst Asian females, is because they suppress their emotions. And then something later in their life will trigger that emotion, and they will negatively take that out on the people around them. And it is the same for males as well. So the next slide is looking at how this is applied in Vedic culture, Vedic literature, in the Mahabharata or the Ramayana. And the Mahabharata is, I like describing this from the Mahabharata point of view because it explains it very nicely in terms of the Kauravas and the Pandavas and the battlefield of Dharamkshetra, Kurukshetra. And your whole entire body is what we call Dharamkshetra, Kurukshetra, which means the bodily field of activity. The bodily field of activity has what we call guns, or these three guns, which are sattva, rajas, and tamas. And on the surface of your body and your mind, the most predominant gun is the tamas, then rajas, and then sattva. What happens is that when you're going through a particular event in your life, someone says something or does something, your tamas gun naturally comes out, is naturally expressed, because your entire physical body is locked within the dimension which we call Maya. And Maya is all around us. It's time, space, vibratory sound of Om, and and the atom, which is Anu, or individual ignorance, which creates everything around us. Now let's take one just aspect of Maya, which is the atom. And the atom is that part of Maya which we all interact with. And it's also, but however, we only interact with 0.4% of the atom, of the Anu. We don't actually interact with the 99.6% of what reality actually is, because our senses, our five senses, are imperfect. They are only capable of picking up certain frequencies and vibrations around us, and we only interact with that, and we create our whole entire reality and our whole life experience based on 0.4% of creation. This is what the Vedas are saying, that Maya consists of these four components, and our consciousness is locked in the surface of our body and the mind. The most expressive gun is tamas, and because of that, we're interacting with Maya. We're interacting with cosmic delusion collectively. However, we are also confused individually, because Anu, or the atom, means individual ignorance. And then it depends on where your mind is sitting. Is your mind sitting with the Kauravas, which is the blind sense mind, or is your mind sitting with the Pandavas, which is pure discrimination, it's intelligence? And kind of modern day personal development talk, what that means is manas, the emotional part of the brain, or is it more buddhi, the human part of the brain? Is it the limbic system, or is it the prefrontal lobe where you're making decisions from? This is how your mind operates. And your mind doesn't just sit within the brain and all around you, it also sits in your heart, it sits in your gut, it's connected to the vagus nerve. Now, the reason why a lot of people tend to overeat is because it is their greed that is making them eat, not necessarily because they need food. And this is where the whole system of Ayurveda is such an essential and brilliant system, because it allows you to live within balance within yourself and with nature around you. And Satyug, when in the time of Valmiki, when the Ramayana was written, and I've done a presentation on the yoga cycles and how they operate in terms of ascending and descending, these rishis, they lived in harmony with nature around them, and yet they were the most advanced civilization. Now, this is something that modern day scientists in Russia, America, UK can't seem to get their head around. Is they describe it as, how can these hermits, these sages, living in these huts and jungles be the most advanced civilization? And you can tell when you take their scriptures and you decode them that actually we're not the ones that are advanced in this day and age. They were way, way more advanced than us, far more superior than us. And humanity probably still has thousands and thousands of years before we can start getting anywhere close to the technology. At the moment, what we're really doing is scratching the surface of the Vedas and beginning to understand words like pranayama, Kriya Yoga, etc., etc., etc. But that is how your mind operates. And how do you then start taking a little bit more control? Well, I alluded to that it's all the interplay of chemicals in your brain. That emotion triggers certain neurochemicals and hormones along your spine, your peripheral nervous system, and ultimately into your brain. You're taking in information from the outside. That information is coming into you through your five senses, your imperfect five senses. Depending on where your mind is sitting within various parts of the body, it is then ultimately giving you some sort of result in your brain, and that creates your reality. And the thing is that we're only operating with ordinary human consciousness. Ordinary human consciousness is like, it's so inferior. There's a statistic that goes around that says that we only use 5 to 10% of our brain. That's a lot of nonsense. We use pretty much most of our brain, most of our brain power. When you're making music or listening to music, your brain is actually functioning more or less at 100%, depending on where you get those figures from. However, what we do only use 5% of, and in some case, people's cases even less than 5%, is their level of consciousness, is their awareness. And the reason why we do that is, like I said, is because your mind is sitting on the surface of the body and the mind. And these yogis of ancient India, they had these particular pranayamas and mudras, for example, like the Labhya Kriya, which is a technique that I teach in the Kriya Yoga lessons, which helps to balance your hormones and your glands and your neurochemicals, which ultimately has a purpose not just for balancing those chemicals, but also for developing towards what we call Kacheri Mudra, which then goes off into different conversation of a more higher and deeper spirituality around the Amrit of immortality, which is related to the cerebrospinal fluid. So this is not just something that as ordinary people have gone through. The reason why these great epics were written, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, is because the avatars which played these out in the cosmic leelas of the rishis, who reconstructed the Akashic records to make these as a result of how the yoga cycles operate, these avatars went through their own challenges. And I have said on many occasions that these scriptures are written on three levels of interpretation: the physical, which is the Adipati; the astral spiritual yogic science, which is now what we're really beginning to scratch the surface of, known as the Adidevic; and then there is the Adi-atomic level of interpretation, which is the actual practice of these techniques and putting the knowledge into practice. And I said that at the beginning of this presentation, it's more important to apply it than to read about it. And within the Ramayana, Ram, he goes through many of his own challenges as a human being here on earth. He's exiled from his own kingdom on the day that he is supposed to, having his coronation. He goes into the jungle for a number of 14 years. He loses his wife to a demon king who at the time was one of the most powerful entities you could call around. And he went to war against him. do you not think that Ram, if we had the opportunity in a time machine to go back and watch these individuals go through that, that they would not be acting like human beings. They would be acting like me and you. Of course they were. Ram had to go through his own challenges. And this is why Valmiki in the Ramayana, he encodes the events on the Adidevic level, which prevents Ram from getting close to bringing Sita back. At those three events, known as the Granthis, the Brahma, the Vishnu, and the Rudra Granthi, are three major events. There are smaller events, but these are the three major events which ultimately knock his confidence. And it's more or less, I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to be able to battle and fight war against Ravan and his army, and I'm never going to be able to bring her back. But he never gave up. And that is the kind of lesson that you learn on the Adi boutique level of interpretation, the power of concentration, the power of self-awareness, the power of being able to expand your consciousness. At a more kind of spiritual level, those three grantees are what we call the safety mechanisms, which prevent the Kundalini Shakti, Sita, from accidentally rising up into the Shishamna and into the Brahmanari, because this Shakti, from a spiritual point of view, is very, very, very powerful. It's a drop of what we call Mahaprakriti, or the universal pranic Shakti, which creates everything, and out of that comes this drop, which creates you, known as the Kundalini or Sitama. Now, the next slide, I alluded to this in about previous 4 slides or so, around understanding the difference in defining spirituality. So understanding the difference between consciousness, the brain, and the mind, and looking at these as three different entities which need to work in synchronization. And then there is the word spirituality. And I want to focus a little bit more on the word spirituality before I give you a technique that you can go away and practice. So spirituality and mental health kind of go hand in hand in this day and age, because there is a lot of text out there, there's a lot of talk out there that when your Kundalini starts rising, that you're going to automatically start going through some sort of spiritual experience because you're awakening, and as a result, this leads to depression and anxiety. And there are people out there that actually advocate this, that talk about that, oh, the reason why this is happening to you is because your Kundalini has awoken. Now that is a lot of nonsense, because nobody's Kundalini awakens accidentally. It just doesn't happen like that. Mental health and spirituality, like I said, go hand in hand, and it depends how it's being applied. Now, there is a lot of information out there on people who convert from one religion to another. And the thing that we have to do with an expanded consciousness is to understand why that's happening. Why are they converting from one religion to another? The underlying factor that is usually because of mental health issues, is usually because of trapped emotions, because of family situations, or because of events that they have been through. And their brain, their mind is attached to some sort of religion. And that religion is ultimately pushing them away as a result of whatever cultural differences there are. And what happens is that when they convert to something else, a different religion, for example, that religion before was causing, that word religion, doesn't matter what religion that is, was before causing this mental health. But then when they go to something else, they're accepted, they're encouraged to socialize, and naturally their mental health issues start improving. Now, there is research in science that shows that if you stand in a pose which shows that you're Superman, for example, if you stand in the Superman pose or the Wonder Woman pose for 2 minutes, and you can hold that pose for 2 minutes in a crowd, for example, in a corporate meeting, if you can stand straight, confident, shoulders back, looking at everyone in the eye for 2 minutes, if you can do that, your dopamine levels, your feel-good hormones will go up by 20%, and serotonin, which causes depression and anxiety, will go down by 15%, simply by doing that. Now, when you have people around you helping you to do that, you naturally feel better, because ultimately, I don't believe that religion has anything to do with people wanting to convert from one thing to another, because the way I look at it is if you don't understand the religion that you come from, you have very little chances of understanding the religion that you're converting to. That's my personal opinion and my experience of it. Because if you can understand what we call the Sutra Atma, you can understand the golden thread, which connects everything at the Devic and at the Atmic level of interpretation. How people literally want to interpret that at the Adibhatik is a matter of where the mind sits from a spirituality point of view. And ultimately, everybody is spiritual as far as I'm concerned, and at some level of some sort. It's just a case of some people's consciousness is operating at 5% or less, other people's consciousness is operating at a higher level. To me, that's the only difference. Now, the next slide is a technique which you can use, that I have used personally when you are not feeling so good. So it doesn't always necessarily have to be that you're being depressed or you're going through anxiety or stress, but this technique is like synchronizing your mind first thing in the morning. We are encouraged to update our ISO software, and we need to download the latest app and synchronize our iPads or electronic devices or whatever, because they will operate properly. But nobody ever tells you to synchronize your mind so your mind works properly. It works in synchronization. And this very simple technique, which is a part of the Kriya Yoga lessons that I teach, helps you to do that. So first thing in the morning, when you wake up, within the first 10 seconds of getting up, spring out of bed, sit on the edge of your bed, or even lying down, and close your eyes and focus both your physical eyes at the point between the eyebrows. That is known as Ayodhya. And the reason why we call that Ayodhya, because it's the prefrontal lobe, the human part of the brain. And Ayodhya means no battle, no conflict. It's an equilibrium. Now take one short and one long inhalation, and at the same time, tense your entire body. Hold that tension for 3 seconds and release that tension with one short and one long exhalation. And do that up to 12 times. That helps relax the body. Then take one deep breath in and release it, and just observe the breath. Don't try to focus on anything else. Keep your mind fixed to the breath. And there is a reason for that. And the reason for it is to do with the vayus and the prans that are operating outside of you and within you. Now, take a note of that. If you don't take a note of that, this video will be on YouTube later today for you to go through that again. But what I want to very quickly show is the last 2 slides, and I've got a couple of minutes left, is that people like Steve Jobs, they talk a lot about following your heart and intuition. And I had said that your heart sits on different parts of the body. It sits in the brain, it sits in the heart, it sits in the gut, it sits on various parts. The mind is also, the mind sits on various parts of the body, but the mind is also different in terms of which country you're from, which culture you're related to, which environment you're from. So the mind is this very complex, massive entity outside in the external world as well as internally. But if you are able to follow your heart and your intuition, and your heart has 40,000 neurons, which are connected to the Gaia, your heart will give you a quicker decision than your brain will give you, because your brain is taking in information from the outside, trying to make sense of it rationally. However, it's not using the heart. And in Star Trek, it's used, that whole concept is used in the American series or movies of Star Trek. Vulcans take in information and they process that information and come up with the best probability. Captain Kirk makes his decisions with his heart, his intuition, which is better connected, which is why he's the captain of the ship. So if you want to be the captain of your ship, do what people like Steve Jobs were doing, practicing those techniques, having a purpose, and it doesn't matter what challenge you get in your life, it's not a challenge, it's something that you need to get through because you have a purpose and you have a passion. And in the last minute or so, these are just some thoughts that I had when I was writing this presentation down, that the opinions of other people are the cheapest commodities in the market. And someone like Krishna was very good at using this as a weapon against Duryodhan, because he could influence his mind. And like I kind of alluded to, is don't confuse mental health with spirituality. There is research out there, meta-analysis of 42 studies, which shows how religion can impact and can also benefit spirituality. And I'll just let you read through these over the next kind of 30 seconds. I do hope that you have enjoyed this presentation. The last two that I've just noticed are exactly the same. I will be uploading this onto YouTube later. And if you need to contact me, you can over WhatsApp, if you have my contact details, or Facebook Messenger or Instagram. And I do make it a habit to reply to each and every single individual that takes the effort to contact me. Thank you very much for your time and have a good day.